Whelan Presley Funeral Home and Crematory, a proud supporter of WQPT, has been serving Quad City families since 1889. They now have live stream capabilities for viewing your loved one's funeral or memorial service.
At IHM VCU, we've always been here for you. You are and always will be our top priority. We care about your financial and physical health, and we are here. IHM VCU is a proud supporter of WQPT.
Marijuana in the classroom, and a zip line and a big splash for downtown in the cities. Moline is looking to give its heart a shot of adrenaline. It could include more living space, more art space, more public space, and how about a zip line to the top of the old Kone Tower? More on that still ahead. But first, cannabis and the classroom. Western Illinois University has launched not one, but two marijuana minors for students to consider. One is run out of the agriculture department, looking at the practical side of growing and cultivating, testing and selling cannabis and hemp. The other looks at the impact of all this pot on society. That one is centered in Western's anthropology department, and we talked with one of its creators, Heather McIlvaine-Newsad from Macomb. This has been a sea change when it comes to marijuana in Illinois in just a period of what, less than 5 years, certainly.
Yeah, so in January of 2020, Illinois became the 11th state in the United States to legalize cannabis for both medical and recreational use. It was I think the first state in the nation to legalize recreational sales by an act of state legislature, and with the exception of Vermont, which legalized recreational use but not sales, every other state that has legalized it has done so by voter mandate.
And Western Illinois University is kind of blazing the trail right now as well by offering these courses, not only as you are studying how it affects society and culture, but also the pragmatic part of growing marijuana, testing marijuana, the production of marijuana as part of the agriculture department. I mean, that's an amazing change also for Western.
It is. It's a big change. And I really, want to give credit to my colleagues in the ag department, but also especially to Dr. Sarah Haynes, who's the co-creator of our cannabis and culture interdisciplinary minor, because we recognize that cannabis is not just about the production of it, but it's about how people use cannabis as a medicine or as a part of religiosity or recreational use. And so understanding the multiple variables that influence the way in which humans are currently using and have used cannabis for thousands of years is really important. And we are the only minor in the nation that we know of that has this interdisciplinary minor focusing on social justice issues and cannabis and culture.
So what exactly is going on? Is society changing that much? And it's driving the politicians to change? Or have the politicians changed so much that it's almost accepting of what society already is going through?
So I think it's a combination of both, but really legislation and government is lagging behind. A recent poll conducted by the Pew Research Center from April 5th through the 2021 showed that overwhelming majority of U.S. adults, 91%, said they either thought that cannabis should be legalized for medicinal and recreational use, or 60% said that it could be legalized for medicinal use only. So we're seeing popular consent among voters, but still having some hesitancy from political leaders.
Well, because marijuana was a big deal in the 60s and the 70s, and it's really become kind of passé. It's like, yeah, it's there. I mean, even when it's illegal, it's been like, yeah, okay, whatever. I mean, does that lead to it in a lot of ways?
Well, I think, again, when you look at who our politicians still are, they are not representative of the vast majority of Americans or the diversity of Americans. So I think it's a combination of both. It's also important to note that to become part of the cannabis industry, it costs an awful lot of money up front in order to be able to do so. So, there's that factor as well. And I'd also note that in the state of Illinois, it was actually 4 women who were at the forefront of crafting and pushing through the legislation.
Why do you think that was important? I mean, do you think that that's what gave it an extra push?
Well, I think because the state of Illinois is the first one to really have this kind of social justice component to the legalization, the recreational and medicinal legalization, and their focus on trying to allow underrepresented groups into the industry. It's really groundbreaking nationally.
What have we learned so far? I mean, you've been teaching students this. I mean, the minor isn't brand new. I mean, it's really relatively new, but it's not like starting this fall. What have you learned in the classes that you've had leading up to this day?
So I've learned that there's a tremendous interest from our students. This coming fall will be the second year for the minor. We had 15 minors the first year, and that's unheard of. One of the core courses that I teach, called Cannabis and Culture, which is the basic survey course, was full to capacity at the very beginning, and this is then during the COVID crisis. So there's definitely an interest there, an interest to learning how different cultures utilize cannabis, what they think about it, how it's been legalized, all of those kinds of things. And for this generation of students, it's not a taboo subject, right? It's just another subject to be studied holistically from a political perspective, from a historic perspective, from a gendered perspective, from an economic perspective. And it's something that people are really interested to learn a lot more about.
Well, and also from a judicial aspect as well as a racial aspect, which is another point of the classes that you're teaching.
Correct. So as I mentioned before, the state senators Heather Steens, Toy Hutchison, and state representatives Kelly Cassidy and Janine Jordan Booth from Peoria, they are the women that crafted this. And it was really, really important for their legislation to have this social justice component to it, because when cannabis was illegalized or considered to be illegal in the United States, there really was a huge uptick in brown and black people being prosecuted for it, even though everybody uses it. So that was really, really important for them. And it's legislation that other states around the United States are looking towards to see what works and what doesn't work so well.
When you take a look at the history of cannabis, and you did bring up, the fact that it had an impact on minority populations, but you also take a look at like the 1960s and the 1950s, where movies like Reefer Madness are now almost seen as camp, almost as a comedy in so many different ways. But there was that lesson that if you have marijuana, it's a gateway drug to other drugs. You're just going to be on the wrong path right now. How do we talk about that these days? I mean, is that now thought of as, well, that was back then, we didn't know anything?
Well, I think it's important to kind of look at how cannabis was classified as a Schedule I drug, as a drug that had absolutely no medicinal properties to it, but we know that that's not true. So in 1937, when it became illegal by Harry Anslinger, who was the first commissioner of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, he made some really notoriously racist remarks about the use of marijuana or cannabis, which, is part of a religious belief system of Native peoples in the United States, in Mexico, and was also really popular among African Americans and part of the jazz culture. So, when we talk about that and then Reefer Madness, we, like you mentioned, we see it kind of as a campy movie right now, but it really wasn't in the 1930s. It really represented pervasive beliefs that cannabis was being pushed on white people by out of control Black and brown people in the United States. So our interdisciplinary minor talks about those kinds of things contextually, and then the long-term ramifications for what this means for Black and brown people who are cannabis users and who are incarcerated as a result of that.
Western obviously really leading the way with cannabis and culture as a minor and cannabis production as a minor as well. And I just thought it was interesting that on top of everything that you're teaching, you also have a study abroad program that's associated with this as well. I mean, you're really pushing this issue forward. And as you said, it's really connecting with students.
Yeah, so we have a lot of interest for our upcoming trip. It'll be the inaugural trip to the Netherlands in May of 2022. And cannabis has not it's not really legal in the Netherlands, but it's been decriminalized since 1976 for adult use, recreational use, when it's purchased and consumed in what they call coffee shops or social consumption lounges. And so there's a lot to learn from other cultures and how they have been able to craft laws to tax, to use the revenue, to create new policies and social programs as a result of a booming industry. So we've got interviews lined up with leaders in the cannabis industry in and outside of Amsterdam, and are really looking forward to being able to begin what is hopefully a long-term exchange.
In Illinois, of course, you're always talking about, and you working at Western know this so well, always talking about budgets and deficits and money, and the state needs more and things along that line. And you take a look at the cannabis tax revenues. Illinois taxes it at quite a high rate, and the tax revenues are equaling, if not exceeding, alcohol and liquor sale tax revenues. What does that say right now?
It says that there is money to be made on cannabis, which is, I think, one of the reasons why it's such a popular industry to enter. So, yeah, I mean, we definitely need more money, right? And as you mentioned, the retail sales for recreational cannabis in Illinois alone have averaged about $40 million each month since it's been legalized. So that's a lot of money that can be used for infrastructure. There's common saying for potholes, right? All kinds of things. We need money for education. We need money for social services. We need money for sidewalks, all kinds of things. So people are consuming cannabis, and the state governments and regional municipalities can definitely benefit from it.
Anthropology professor Heather McIlvaine-Newsted, co-creator of Western Illinois University's Cannabis and Culture minor. Still ahead, a huge fountain and an over-the-top zip line through downtown Moline. Is that part of what lies ahead for the city center? But first, here's Laura Adams with great ideas for you when you head out and about.
This is Out and About for August 20th through 26th. Events on the 21st include the annual Floatzilla. Register at River Action. The Riverfront Pops present the music of the Rolling Stones, Mick Jagger and Keith Richards' 1969 at LeClaire Park at 7:30. The ISC World Tournament continues through the 21st in Eldridge, Iowa, and Clinton, Iowa River Event Center celebrate the 4th annual Body, Mind, and Spirit Expo. Also on the 21st, the East Moline Freedom Fest. A fundraiser, Bags and Bands, for the Ride with Kelly Foundation takes place at the North Shore Inn in Moline, while the Village of East Davenport Wine Walk starts at 3. The World of Outlaw Stock Car Race 3-day bash begins the 26th at the Mississippi Valley Fairgrounds, and learn about Dred Scott and his legacy at Bishop Hill the 21st at 2. Upcoming concerts include a special Mercado on 5th at the Rock Island County Fairgrounds the 20th at 5, the Live at 5 Courtyard Concert the 27th featuring the Class of 82, and Alewife at Bass Street Landings Concert Series the 26th. On stage, Saturday Night Fever at Circa 21, the Whistleblower Power's Dilemma at Playcrafters Barn Theater the 20th through 22nd, Ballet on the Lawn at the Outing Club the 22nd at 1 and 7, and the Black Box Theater presents the last performances of the psychological thriller Murder in Green Meadows in downtown Moline through the 28th. For more information, visit wqpt.org.
Thank you, Laura. Charlotte Boyer issued a new release in April called Warriors, and she was also recently hitting the stage at Rock Island Schwiebert Park for the Abbey Road and More concert. But before all that, she came to the Black Box Theater in Moline to perform one of her original works. Here's Charlotte Boyer with Beginning to Feel the Blues.
When we were little kids, eating Lunchables and watching The Incredibles, but there ain't no more lunchtime to be had. Juice box is always empty, and the playground is trash. And the playground is trash. Now I'm beginning to feel the blues. 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 Riding on skateboards along the parking lot, playing hide and seek till it got dark. Dancing to the MJCD, but now my friends don't wanna jam with me. Now I'm beginning to feel the blues. 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 Beginning to feel the blues. I'm beginning to feel the blues. As people change and people run on, but still my life remains the same. People move and people grow up, but still my life will never change. I'm beginning to feel the blues. 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 'Cause things are not the same as they were before, and they are not my friends anymore. Things are not the same as they were before, and they are not my friends anymore.
Charlotte Boyer with Beginning to Feel the Blues, recorded at the Black Box Theater in downtown Moline. That theater is just one of the businesses trying to make the heart of Moline unique. And over the past several months, a group called the Urban Land Initiative has been test marketing ideas that could spark a new era of downtown development once the Interstate 74 bridge is gone. That report was just issued. And now Renew Moline wants to see how much of what's on paper could become reality. And we talked with Renew Moline's president and chief executive officer, Alexandria Elias. Alex, it seemed like the three biggest recommendations involved things that we already knew. Improving housing, improving the arts, and having some kind of a gathering space, a big deal park in downtown Moline.
Yes, those were some of the main organizing principles and what the authors of the report called the big ideas, kind of the big three ideas that came out of it. I think those all three start with information and a condition that's already here in our downtown. But it really starts to capitalize on those and take them further.
Well, and the exclamation point, of course, is this talk about this big shooting geyser of water, like a focal point fountain, and also the possibility of a zip line that could somehow be attached to the old Kone Tower, which is now owned by Heritage Church. I mean, that's like eye candy right now. Is that? Do you see that as more than eye candy? Is that something that could really be realized?
Well, I think the spout in the river is certainly something that is a good idea in the sense that it's intended to attract people by something that they would see on the bridge that they would say, oh, wow, that looks interesting. Let's go down and see what's there, which is the whole point behind it. So whether it's a fountain or something else, I think the zip line is a little bit more of a stretch of the imagination. But, again, this was intended to foster inspirational and aspirational thinking. And I think one of the main tenets of all of this is that we have this wonderful asset that is our river. And getting people down there and creating exciting activities that people will drive from Peoria and Chicago to see is really what we're trying to do. So whether it's a zip line or a fountain in the river or something else, we have a long way to go in refining some of these ideas and working with the council and the mayor to determine what direction they want to go and what kind of investments the community is willing to look at for these areas.
Well, let's be honest, because the city and Renew Moline has always been looking at downtown as a way of, and Chamber of Commerce as well, of course, as a way of spurring economic development. You have that extra 12 acres of land that's just pristine once the bridge is gone, the old bridge is gone. What did this report actually tell you that you didn't necessarily already know?
I think one of the things that came out of it for me, well, probably two things. One, the observation that they had about the fact that we have a very dynamic and beautiful Fifth Avenue, which has restaurants and a little bit of retail on it. And then we have River Drive, which also has restaurants and activities that people are already at. And so one of the observations that they had that I found very useful was that we need to connect those two corridors that we already have. So one of the things that they said to us was, don't reinvent the wheel. You have some really good bones and you should work to connect those activity centers that you already have. So doing that through residential, I thought was a really good observation for us. And then the other thing is, I think, we take the river for granted. And I know we've had this conversation sort of Quad Cities wide when, Dave Harrell and Visit Quad Cities did worked with residents to do the tourism master plan. We talked a lot about how Quad citizens take the river for granted. And so I think having people come and say, listen, there are 200 acres of riverfront and waterfront that is at Moline's front door that you should do something with, is a compelling statement coming from experts who have done this all over the country. So those were probably the two things that I really found to sort of direct our thinking as a community, really.
The thing about it is that people who know Moline would say, okay, you do have River Drive, you have Fifth Avenue, but you got to remember between those two you have a rail line and a very busy one-way. Getting from one to the other can be dangerous at times and inconvenient almost all the time.
Yes, and then the other challenge that we have is that, while downtown Davenport and downtown Rock Island, their historic districts and their little commercial node is much closer to the river, in part because, downtown Moline was manufacturing for a very long time. And so our perceived distance from River Drive to the river in some cases is bigger than it would be, say, in downtown Davenport or downtown Rock Island. So I think the other element that I've thought about a lot, actually, since coming here 3 years ago, is that we need some vertical elements that signal to people visually when they're on River Drive that the river is very close. So I'm sitting here talking to you at River Drive and 15th Street, and I can sort of peer over the parking lot toward the Radisson and know that the river's there, but I can't see it just because of the topography here. And I think if we had some vertical elements, with a nautical theme perhaps, or some kind of unifying visual feature that told people the river's there, I think those are the sorts of other ideas that we really want to start to implement. And those are small things that can be done, in a fairly straightforward manner.
Well, you do know that the old Interstate 74 bridge and the off-ramps and all that really did slice downtown into two different areas way back in the 1950s. Are you trying to sew that up now? I mean, is there a way to try to tie it in with, let's say, Ben Butterworth or even Western Illinois University, everything that's really east of even the new Interstate 74?
Yes, and one of the things that you notice if you walk down there right now, you can walk under the old bridge, and what you notice is that it's largely on piers. And so from the ground level, it's pretty transparent. And the new bridge is different in that in a couple of key locations, it's not on piers anymore, it's on fill. So it's on, land with a road on top. So they've built up those areas. And so it is probably more of a physical impact, particularly since now Fifth Avenue doesn't go through and underneath the bridge anymore, it ends. And so one of our key lines of thinking, if you will, is how to make sure that that east side does not feel cut off from downtown. So we have a couple of areas that could host a new development, perhaps a park. And I think the mayor and council, as they start to refine some of these ideas, one of the themes that we'll be talking with them about is to try and make sure that that east side still feels connected to downtown.
The other thing is that reports come and go, and a lot of times, it's a big binder that collects dust on somebody's shelf, and you know that so well. What are you going to do to prevent that from happening this time? And let's be honest, the new bridge should be fully functional by next year. The old bridge will be tumbling down sometime in the next 18 months. Your work can start almost, in terms of economic development right now.
Yes, and I've often thought, I remember people sort of grumbling pre-pandemic about how slow the bridge was going, and I think there's nothing like a pandemic to make it look like the bridge is going at warp speed, and certainly has made progress when a lot of other of us didn't feel like we were able to make progress. So I think the city's adding staff will be helpful. Bob Vitas, the new city administrator, has been on for just 2 months, and I've had a number of occasions I have regular meetings with him, and we've talked a lot about this area. So we're excited to work with the city as they build a complete team. And one of the things you will notice if you look at the report from the Urban Land Institute is that they really had a focus at the end on project management. And I think, having spent 25 years in city planning, I think the answer to your question is how to make sure that the study or the report doesn't sit on a shelf, is to really have a strong culture of project management in place by city staff, regularly bringing progress reports, policy, requesting policy direction from the mayor and council, and really, starting to chip away at this, because it's not rocket science, but it does take a lot of partners. It takes resources, and it takes a team that is committed every day to making real progress. And I think that I was surprised actually to see that in the ULI report, but I thought it was very insightful, because these are development professionals. These are people that have done things that are exciting and big in other cities. And while they were encouraging us to think big, they were also recognizing that we need to make sure we have the tools in place to implement our plan.
Absolutely. And so now that you have the report, and now that you have people that are actually, involved in the creation of what will be downtown Moline, where do you go forward? Where do you go from this point forward?
One of the key things I have heard from the mayor and council and new administrator Vitas is that they are interested in the community's feedback on these ideas specifically. And so right now we are working to figure out what's the best format to get public opinion and community input on this. I was very grateful to the newspaper for putting in a very good summary, including a lot of very specific details about the report into the newspaper. And so in that manner, we reached a lot of people. And so I'm hoping we can come up with a variety of different ways that people can give their input, and that the mayor and council can take that input and then really see what direction they want to go. So those are the next steps.
Renew Moline's president and chief executive officer, Alexandria Elias. On the air, on the radio, on the web, and on your mobile device, plus streaming on your computer. Thanks for taking some time to join us as we talk about the issues on the cities.
Whelan Presley Funeral Home and Crematory, a proud supporter of WQPT, has been serving Quad City families since 1889. They now have live stream capabilities for viewing your loved one's funeral or memorial service.
At IHM VCU, we've always been here for you. You are and always will be our top priority. We care about your financial and physical health, and we are here. IHM VCU is a proud supporter of WQPT.